Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Leading with Grace. I am so excited to introduce you to my next guest in the forgiveness series. And some of you may know that I started getting certified to be trauma informed and to learn more about trauma and healing and getting some more tools to utilize in my coaching practice and to help other women to unpack their trauma and to begin healing from it. And one of the things that I was told in in signing up was that it was an important aspect of going through this certification was to get my own like trauma coach or trauma therapist. And so I thought, okay, I guess I better go hire a coach now. And there's several out there, but I was talking to a good friend of mine and she said, "Hey, there is a trauma coach on the LDS Life Coach Directory podcast. You should go listen to it." So I went and listened to it and I totally connected with her. And it is with Cami Birdno. And everything that she said just resonated with me. So I knew I had to get on a call with her. So as soon as actually before I even finished the podcast and listening to her, I actually found her on her website and booked a call. And then I finished listening to her on this podcast. And I have not regretted it since. And it's been so interesting that as I've been working with her every week, it has also been like the right timing for things that have come up that I wanted to deal with and work through and feel all the feelings, even when I didn't want to feel all the feelings. And she will tell you that I try to be pretty honest. I don't know how honest I really am. I think there are times where I think I hold back. I'm just being totally honest and transparent here. But at the same time, I know that I'm in the right place doing the hard work because there's been times where I just tell her, I don't want to be here. I don't want to talk about this. I don't want to feel my feelings. I don't want this memory to come up. I don't want to dive into it. And yet I show up every week because I am seeing the impact and the results of doing this work. And so if any of you are looking for a trauma coach, I highly, highly recommend Cami Birdno. You will not regret it. It has been life-changing. But anyway, I wanted to bring in a trauma coach to talk about where forgiveness fits in our traumas, in our healing journey, in finding peace and understanding. And I definitely wanted to bring Cami on. And I think that what she has to share I will be bold enough to say life changing for you. And I hope that it will answer questions that you have been wrestling with for a really long time and you've been searching and seeking. And I really believe that the answers will be found in this session and in this episode. So before I begin with the questions, I'm going to turn the time over to Cami and allow her to introduce herself to you and how she got on this healing journey of facing her past and making peace with it. So, Cami, say hello.
All right. Hello. Thank you so much, Yo. That was quite a glowing recommendation. I
I
appreciate
meant
it.
all of it. I meant all of it.
You're amazing. And that was fun. I didn't know that was like how you found me and that you already scheduled before you even finished the podcast. And yeah,
Yep.
I think that was really fun. And yeah, thank you so much. You are incredible. Like you say, like I do love that you come and be like, I don't even want to do this work. And
Yep.
and yet I'm still here showing up and offering
Yes.
like, one of the big things I talk about is choice. Like anytime you mention that, I always make sure that we check in and really decide. Like you always get to choose whether you're going to do the work or not. And that's so powerful. And you check in and you decide and you do it. And
Yeah.
we go in as much as it's safe and come back out as we need to. So all of that is super powerful. So good job.
Thank you.
Yes. But yeah, for how I got here, I found coaching first through Jody Moore and found mindset stuff and just started to it was really powerful for me because my trauma story is that I had suppressed all of my trauma and repressed all of it. So I didn't remember any of it. And I found Jody back in like 2017 and was like, oh, just the fact that I could start thinking differently, right? Trauma comes in black and white, right? So I had always just learned one way of thinking. The way that I thought was either good or bad. There was no anything besides that. And so being able to find Jody and have this mindset idea of like, oh, I can think differently. There are different thoughts. There are different ways of viewing it. I am actually creating my own results based on what I'm thinking. And the whole idea of feeling was a little weird for me. Like I remember when she first was like, get into your body, because I had dissociated and got out of my body for so long that I was like, I don't even know what you mean. Like go in and feel something. What does anger feel like? I don't even know. Like it stops here, right? Like it's all up in my
Yeah.
head. And so that was really weird for me at first. And I actually couldn't even do that until I started having my trauma come up. So then in 2019, I actually took a course from Jennifer Finlayson Fife that was all about the art of desire. And because I had this background of realizing I could think differently, the questions she would ask would I would have these beliefs come up and my body would respond in ways that I'm like, what is this? Like,
Wow.
do I really, I must believe this thought. Like it would come up and I'd be like, where did that even come from? I don't understand that. But with it would come like all these visceral responses that were scary and that I immediately shoved down because I didn't know what they were, right? But I knew that they were
Yeah.
associated with it. And so starting to realize, oh, these come from somewhere. And so I was able to do a little bit of thought work, but realizing then as I kind of let that in and as I kind of let some of those emotions start to come up, then it was a floodgate of like, I started having nightmares. I started having flashbacks. I started having
Oh,
memories
wow.
of all this abuse that I had experienced. And it was terrifying. And I didn't know at that point, once it came up, I couldn't shove it back down again. And
Wow.
I think it was a beautiful thing in the fact that my body was like, you are not shoving it down again. You have tools now, you have mindset stuff, and you're going to realize that the mindset stuff only takes you so far. And then this
Hmm.
body stuff, like the mind is like a top down approach and you have access to your prefrontal cortex. But when you have this trauma and these visceral responses, your survival, your nervous system comes online and it is now in charge and your prefrontal cortex goes out the window. And so starting
Wow.
to realize mindset doesn't work in that. So I needed to start reaching out to learning different body based things. So I, started taking all these trauma summits and started learning, oh, somatic work, polyvagal, chakra. I just started getting into all this inner child work, compassionate inquiry, starting to really understand that there's a difference and being able to realize, oh, what is coming up here are these trauma cycles that have been trapped in my body, and we can actually release these trauma cycles. I had to first learn how to just even feel an emotion and let that process through my body, and then I could start to learn how to let a trauma emotion come up, a sensation come up, and let that
Yeah.
cycle through my body. And so it was kind of when I, got to when you asked like why did I, for one, it was just I wanted those flashbacks, those memories to stop coming. I wanted to be able to figure out how to get rid of them, not understanding language wise of that I needed to let them go and release them. I just knew I wanted them to stop. Um, and then realizing that like I couldn't pretend anymore, like it was
Yeah.
starting to affect my relationships. My kids were starting to notice. Like I would try to just like let the flashbacks kind of play in the back of my mind and still function and do my everyday life. But I started like shaking uncontrollably and I didn't notice. And so the fact that like my kids are like, Mom, why are you shaking? I'm like, I'm not shaking. What are you talking about? And I would look at my hands and I literally couldn't see that I was shaking. It wasn't until one of my kids started holding it and their hands started
Wow.
shaking that I was like,
Yeah.
oh, I am shaking. Like that's how dissociated and how out of my body I was. I couldn't even look
Yeah.
at my own hands and see that I was shaking. Right. So for me, it was that I needed a big thing like that. Some people don't need that. Some people just need like to realize, hey, I don't like how I'm acting. I need a transformation. I want to change. Right. But for me, I think because I had been in freeze for so long, I needed something drastic to show me that I needed to get back in my body. So,
Wow. And so have they stopped?
yes, yes, those
That's amazing.
those flashback, and now I still will have some memories come back. I will have visceral responses. I will have nightmares, but they don't terrify me. They don't play on repeat in my brain because as they come up, I'm able to let them come up. I'm able to not have the judgment. I've and Peter Levine talks about being able to uncouple the fear. So I have learned how to uncouple the fear that was associated with all of that trauma. So
Yeah.
now when things come up, I'm like, oh, I see what that is. I can address it. I let it come up. I process it through my body. I do whatever movement I need to, um, whether that be, going outside, just doing a breathing meditation. It can be something big, it can be something small, just whatever I have time for that day. Um, or sometimes being like, hey, this is coming up. I don't have time to deal with this today and process this. I'm just going to breathe a little bit and then I'm going to process it later, in a couple days or whatever. Right. So
Yeah.
I don't have, but yeah, I do not have the constant nightmares. I don't have the constant flashbacks, and they are now released from my body. And it's interesting. I have like, I know what they are still, and I
Hmm.
can still even see some of what used to be the flashbacks that would come back and cause this visceral body response, but I don't
Yeah.
have the emotional response connected to it. So I'm just like, I know that happened in my past,
Got it.
but it doesn't affect me the same way. Thinking about it and having it come back up doesn't affect me in the same way. Like I'll still see, so because my perpetrators were family members. So sometimes if I still see them or around them, those things will come back up, those memories and things. And I will have my boundaries in place to make sure that I keep myself safe and I keep my kids safe, but I don't have the visceral responses. I don't have my survival come online and need to protect me and get me out of there. So it's really powerful to be able to have it be gone and be able to function from my higher self.
That is amazing. That is so amazing. And it sounds like when you started getting these nightmares, when you started getting these flashbacks, okay. I'm only guessing that it really like throws you for a loop
Oh, yeah,
in
it's
regards to your
terrifying.
relationship. Yeah, just the life that you thought you were living has just kind of it's all upside down.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so with that upside down effect, how were you making sense of how were you making sense of gospel principles and specifically forgiveness? But I don't know. I'm kind of guessing, and I could be wrong on this. You start just questioning what is going on in my life, but then like
Yeah,
what's going on with my belief system? What's going on with my faith? What's going on with
absolutely.
with these foundations that I thought were foundations and they're crumbling. My life is crumbling. Can you speak about
100%.
that?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I think that you are not the only one that would be wrestling with these questions.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Because I do think, I know for me, like one of the wrestles that I had a lot was that the church had actually been like a coping mechanism for me, right? And getting these moral standards and these values had been something that I had leaned upon, not understanding. So once my trauma came up, I realized, oh, I was leaning on this, but I understood it in this way. And sometimes it was definitely given to me in this way so that I would stay stuck in my trauma, right? So that my perpetrators
Yeah.
would make sure that I didn't ever come out of it. So I stayed in this place where they could continue to abuse me.
Yeah.
Um, and whether they did that consciously or not, like some of those values and those frameworks worked for them to keep me stuck, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so starting to realize, like, oh, that actually, like, I can see how it helped me. And now I'm really ticked off that that was my experience. And now I really don't want any part of that. I want to separate myself from that. And right. And I do think it's good to take a step back too, because there is a part of like, when all of that is happening and when there's coping around any of those type things, we become enmeshed with them. We believe them so much. It is our coping thing. It's the way that we survive, right? So being able to step away, to no longer be enmeshed, to be able to look at it. And some people have to step completely away and not be able to look at it for a long time. I was able to kind of step away, still be in association and do all those things and start to deconstruct things and figure things out, right? But
Yeah.
specifically, when you talk about forgiveness, like one of the things I want to speak to is it is very common to have a narrative when it comes to trauma of, I have done something wrong, right? Anything bad that happens is my fault. It's my responsibility. I need to fix it. I need to take on other people's stuff, right? Like, and other people, of course, want you to. And that's part of the coping to keep you stuck is to take on the blame and this and that and the other. But and it's how we survive in trauma. right? So
Yeah.
it's a very common narrative. And especially if the trauma happened when you were young, it happened with somebody who had authority over you, or someone who you perceived had authority over you, maybe somebody a little bit older, even if it's only a few months older, right? But and I think lots of times the way that we're taught about forgiveness actually, because it's oftentimes like you need to forgive somebody else, right? Like you need to forgive if somebody's done something bad to you, you need to forgive them and be the higher person than this and that and the other, right? Um, and we often talk about it because it'll just make you feel better. But really, it is about like, why do you need to forgive them? So that they can feel better. So that it's like an external show almost, right? And I don't think that's
Yeah.
what real forgiveness is. I think real forgiveness is a conscious letting go while still being connected to our inner wisdom. So
Mm.
it's like a dissolving. So, like, I mean, if you think of like, you put salt in water, right? And you stir it around a little bit, the salt is still there, the water is still there, but it's dissolved in a way that it works, right? And so a forgiveness is starting to be a letting go. And I want to also say, like, I think the really important part is I don't find it very helpful, and I haven't found it very helpful with any of my clients so far. Um, and not to say that, I haven't covered everyone. So it might be helpful for some people to
Yeah.
first forgive their perpetrators or the people who have harmed them. Um, I find where the forgiveness has to start first before that can even happen is the forgiveness of ourselves, which again, lots of times we think, well, we only need to forgive if we've done wrong. If we've been abused in some way, we didn't actually do anything wrong, right? But remember that narrative that we have that was in trauma of I have done something wrong
Yeah.
and I am responsible, right? And so it's that forgiving of the fact that we even believed that. So it's the like and forgiving ourselves because like when we do that, like when we look back on ourselves, we look at the different ways that we acted. And I know for me, like I would be so mad, like, why did I act that way? Like there's almost a loathing and a disgust
Mhm.
with the way that we acted because we kind of let the abuse keep happening because of the way we acted, right? And some of that like depends on like lots of times if people freeze and all they wanted to do was run away, then they judge themselves for like, why couldn't I free or why couldn't I run away? Why did I just freeze? Or if, you're fighting and you wanted to run away, but you couldn't run away because you were fighting, right? Or you didn't like the way that you fought. You're like, why did I do that? Why did I say that? If
Yeah.
it's the fawning, right? Where you're pretending something and like saying things that aren't really true to you, we have these things of like where we then judge ourselves because our moral standards and our moral compass would not have acted that way. And so does that make sense of where like the forgiveness comes of starting to be able to be like,
Totally.
I love you, I forgive you, and I forgive myself for like judging you and being so mad at you and not, does that make sense? That's
It
where I
does.
kind of see forgiveness.
And when you were talking about forgiveness in that way and defining it that way, I'm sensing such an emotion of love versus forgiving myself and then having guilt and shame and and distress of why you did what you did and beating yourself up. But
Yeah.
you're saying forgiveness is so rooted in love,
Hmm.
self-compassion,
Yes.
self-respect, and and a level of understanding
Hmm.
of like this is all I could do
Yeah.
at the moment. This was the only way to survive.
Yeah.
And now we're looking for something better and more
Hmm.
sustainable.
Right.
So, how do you, first of all, does forgiveness even matter in the healing journey? And what what are some of the steps that you feel like you've taken that you can share with the listeners about this step towards forgiveness in the midst of trauma and healing?
Yeah. Yeah, sure. So I do think it matters in being able, to your point, it's very powerful to start helping those younger versions of us, helping whatever version we were, whatever experience we were in our body, our mindset when we had trauma, right? Is being able to start understanding I can let go all the judgment I have of that. I can let go how, how I think I should have responded and didn't. Um, and so some of the processes with that is, right, just starting to gain trauma education, just starting to understand what is a normal way our bodies respond, and starting to like normalize, I responded in a normal way for that situation. I respond, our body isn't concerned with our moral, or our survival system when it comes online isn't concerned with our moral standards. It is concerned with keeping us alive.
Yeah.
And so if for some reason we did something in that survival state to survive based on the trauma we experienced, and it wasn't congruent with our moral standards, then we have a really hard time with allowing that to happen and being okay with us doing that, right? And so that's where I think the forgiveness and letting go comes, of forgiving us doing something that we were going to do to survive. And can I appreciate and understand that it kept me alive? And now I get to, so part of I think the cool thing of why forgiveness can be powerful is it helps us to reframe the way that we view our trauma. It helps us to reframe the way we view us. It helps us to reframe the way we view those who were in connection to the trauma, whether it be a perpetrator or, just something that happened to us. Being able to let go of the judgment, the hate, the anger, the loathing in a way that's not just like, I'm going to forget about it ever, that it ever happened, but in a way of, I am consciously choosing to let these responses go from my body with this wisdom that I am learning from it. And I'm able to change the way I think. I can change those trauma narratives so that I no longer inherently believe that I'm bad. I no longer inherently believe that I'm responsible for every other bad thing that happens in my life. I don't take it on. I'm able to, and I think it's beautiful too, because I'm able to let people own their stuff, even if they don't want to, right? Like, it's actually a beautiful gift to be like, this is not mine to carry. It's yours. And I can understand why you'd want to avoid it, because I did too. But I can see you for you, and I can give it back to you, not in like a hateful, like shove it off. I mean, and at points, like, to be fair, there are definitely times when I have done that, of like, just get this away from me. I hate you. I hate this. And I think there's steps to that, right? So there are steps to the forgiveness. It is totally okay if that's your first step, to go there and to
Yeah.
shove it off that way, and to know that you can always come back to it, right? But there is a reframe there versus a reframe that's giving it back lovingly, right? And so it's being able to decide, which reframe do I want? Which one is serving me? Which one is helpful for me at this point in my healing? And know that it's going to be different along the journey.
That sounds so empowering,
Yeah.
where it's like you found your voice back. And this is something
Mhm.
that we talked about this week in our session about
Yes.
finding your voice. And it seems like finding your voice is so rooted in choice.
Hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
what do I have the power to do and say?
Yes.
And how do I want to express myself? And like you were saying, sometimes it might be shoving it. It's like, no, and
Hmm.
throwing it back at them.
Hmm.
And at the same time, also knowing that you can also lovingly just put it on the altar and just say, it's yours, or it's yours, God. I'm now going to walk away from it.
Hmm.
This isn't mine to carry anymore.
Right.
And so just starting on you, because it seems like, others would think, well, I will heal if the other person would just do
Hmm.
XYZ or ABC or jump through hoops or change
Right.
or not be that way or not say this. Is that true? Is our healing dependent on another person's behavior?
Absolutely not.
And why not? Like, and
Yeah.
include not only healing but forgiveness. Why
Yeah.
does it not why is it not dependent on another person's decisions?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously, other people doing certain things can make our healing a little bit easier, right? Like, they can definitely, like, and getting some external validation is always a good thing, but
Yeah.
I don't find it can be dependent on that, because then, to your point, we lose our choice, because then we're relying on somebody else's actions.
Yeah.
And I haven't found that ever to serve me or any of my clients, right? To be able to let what I actually have found empowering is to let them be like, you know, I want them to change. I want them to do X, Y, and Z. And I can request it all the time.
Mhm.
And there's the part of accepting that they're not going to possibly ever
Yeah.
change. It's not
Yeah.
ever. And I don't have to like it. Like I can still not like, I can still wish that they would, but that is not what I'm basing my healing off of, because our healing comes from within. Our healing, our body already knows how to heal. Like our body knew how to put us in survival. It knew what things to do. It knew what coping to offer us, but it was never like meant to offer us for the long term. We as humans just don't know how to get out of that. Right. And some of it is societal, cultural conditioning, all of those things. We don't know how to quit doing that. Right. So it's starting to gain awareness of what is happening in trauma. Do I do automatically? And starting to put pauses on those. Like, I know my body goes into this trauma response. When it goes into this trauma response, this is how I act. So, what do I want to do instead? And part of that can only happen as we start to release some of those visceral responses so that they're not so much in charge, so that they don't fully take over, so that there is a space, right, for us to be able to be like, okay. And all of it comes from within. Like, nobody on the outside can tell us the visceral response that we're having. Nobody like changing and doing whatever they're doing. Like our body still would go into survival of like, well, can I really trust them?
Yeah.
Like, you know, like it would still, so it all comes within. And the wisdom for what we can do next again comes from within. You know, we can get ideas from other people, but we always can check back to ourselves of, does this feel true to me? Is this who I am? And part of it is in starting to change those narratives so that we learn who we really are. We can let go of the coping narrative that is not true about us and find our true identity.
Yeah.
So, does that help? Did that answer?
No, that totally does. And again, going back to this is our work. This is your work. This is my
Yes.
work. And
Yes.
so doing the work within your own body, within your own mind, within your own reframing, how has that impacted your your outside relationships with others? Because it sounds like, and this is what Jennifer Finlayson Fife also talks about it, and many others, how there is a balance between being um, being connected to our own self and
Mhm.
being connected to others,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so, how has you reconnecting to your own self, coming home to your own self? That's something that
Mhm.
that we that phrase that we use in trauma is
Yes.
coming to our own wholeness, our own self. How has that made a difference in how you relate to others, especially your perpetrators? And I know this might be treading on some sensitive issues, so if you don't want to talk about that, that
Yeah.
you can just give me an X or something.
No, I definitely can talk to it. Yeah, it is like, to your point, that whole coming home, like we have, as humans, we need to connect, right? Lots of times where our trauma comes from is the fact that we weren't able to connect with people as we were young and growing up, right? Some of
Yeah,
that definitely stems from that. And so there is this innate need to connect with other people. But as we like are connecting with ourselves and knowing who we really are, like kind of to the point of what Jennifer says, we have something to bring to other people in connection, right? We're not
yeah,
just trying to understand them so well that we know how we have to show up in order for them to like us, right? We get to be like, this is who I am. And I am going to bring that. And I want to find out who you are. I don't want to find out just certain parts of you so that I can adapt you to fit me either. It's not about that either, right? It's
yeah,
about being able to truly see ourselves, gives us the ability to start truly being able to see other people and being able to your point, like have a voice and be honest about who we are. Um, we can then start to have it be safe to be honest and knowable to other people, right? Like I know Jennifer talks a lot
yeah,
about like being knowable. And
absolutely.
I know for me, I had to build up capacity within my body to know myself because the parts that I knew about me were terrifying. And and the little pieces that I tried to, you know, because it was all these like terrible narratives about trauma and how terrible a person that I was. And that was
Yeah.
terrifying to me. And I didn't want to share that with anybody. And that's who I thought I was. And then as I started to like kind of work through that, I realized, oh, there were actually parts of me that I tried to offer to people. And they told me that was bad, even though it
Mm,
wasn't. And it was a really good part of me. They just didn't know how to accept it. For one, it would have changed their how they saw me. They might have seen me as a real person instead of somebody they could abuse, right? And so
yeah.
they
Yeah.
couldn't see me that way. So of course they had to shove that down. Um, and so being able to know that I am knowable to myself, it's okay. And I get to test out and try who I want to be knowable with and how knowable I am. And that's where we kind of get to set up boundaries of
Mm,
how knowable am I going to be to this person? And we get to decide and we get to like kind of try it out and be like, oh, no, actually, you're not a safe person for that information. And I used to think like, I hate that I can only be surface with this person. And I don't even want a relationship with them if I can only be surface. And that's fine if that's what you want to create, right? But for
yeah.
me, there are certain people that I keep in my life, um, partly because my children want to at least know who they are, want to somehow have a little bit of a relationship with them. But I keep it very, until my kids are old enough to really decide for themselves.
Yeah.
Um, I keep up definite boundaries for safety and let them, be able to know that this person, I will keep things on a surface level. I think that's safe. They get to know that part of me. They don't get to know the other parts of me. They aren't able to hold that, right? They go into trauma of wanting to then suppress me and this and that and the other. And I know how to do my own work, but I don't want to do the work with them. Right? I don't want to offer
Yeah.
that to them. They do all their coping trauma that then wants to send me into my coping, and I have to either stop it or work through it or go into trauma. And I'm like, I don't even want to do that with them anymore. Like I'm done doing that game.
Yeah.
They're not changing. They're not doing the work to shift and adjust things. So I'm not even going to go there with them anymore. Right. And so like we said, we get to decide how far we want to take things and know that, we can keep people. There are certain members of my family who I don't talk to anymore. And then there's others that I do. And so it just depends on where you're at and how you can hold on to yourself.
Yeah. And I love the questions that you are sharing with us where in one sense you can say you can be resentful and say, why can't I share more of me? And
Hmm.
if this person was different, then I wouldn't be so surfacey. And it feels so disempowering. Like
Hmm.
you're almost like limiting your ability to choose
Right.
versus saying, how noble do I want to be with this person?
Yeah.
How much of myself do I want to reveal? And from there, it feels so empowering. It sounds so empowering. There's so much choice there because you get to decide, but you
Hmm.
get to decide by tapping into who you are
Right.
and from a place of love. And I was remembering one of the things that Adam Miller says. He is a philosopher,
Yes.
LDS author, and he asks this question. And let me see if I could try to remember how he says it. He says, what is it when it comes to the law of love? The question is, what is needful from a place of love? And I know that's not exactly like the way he says it, but what does love require at this time? And
Yeah.
sometimes what love requires is boundaries and limitations.
Hmm.
It requires loving presence for yourself and also loving presence for the limitations of the other person, especially if it is a perpetrator.
Hmm.
Like that's the most loving thing you can do for them and for yourself.
Right.
And so that's what came up for me. And that's not always easy to get to that place because we're also working through our fears that
Yeah.
will still come up or
Yes.
our resentments that will still come up. And also, I almost wonder if doing it from a place of love, especially when it comes to your perpetrator, is in essence forgiveness. Like, what do
Yeah.
you think about that?
I do. I think that's it. And I love like the reframing of that, right? Because that is, to your point, It is forgiveness. And it's not the forgiveness that most people are thinking of. It's
Yeah.
not like if someone was to say, like, I know, like, again, them coming back to us would be like, that's not forgiveness. You haven't really forgiven me. You need to do X, Y, and Z in order to say this forgiveness, right? And so, again, it's like
Yeah.
giving that back to them and being like, I understand that's your understanding of it. It used to be mine too, but that's not what I think it is. And I am doing this and hold on to it and know that, yeah, that is forgiveness. It is like, I love Adam Miller too. And I love adding in there one thing he talks about too is like what goodness is needed here
Mm,
to offer that love, right? And just realizing
yeah.
that like what is good and what I know in my body is good is not going to always be perceived from someone else as goodness.
Yeah.
And that is
Yeah.
okay,
And goodness
right?
could be boundaries. Goodness could be,
Absolutely.
no, I don't think it's good or in goodness to allow myself to be noble,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
so that's causing me to just think, just in my own personal experiences, of just asking myself, what is needed
Right.
here from a place of love, from a place of goodness? And what if, and this might seem, um, I don't know what the listeners will think about this, but what if forgiveness is just acknowledging the limitations of the other person,
Mm-hmm.
of what they don't understand, what they're not willing to understand, what they can't understand. And like you
Yes.
said, giving it back to them says, I'm going to lovingly give it back to you
Yes. Yes.
because I know you don't understand and you can't understand.
Right. And I love that too, because it like puts it on, the person to be able to let them be a person, let them be someone who makes mistakes. We all make mistakes. And I also want to clarify, I do think it's important that people can do acts that are unforgivable. Like
Yeah.
the action, what happened can be unforgivable. You do not ever have to forgive that act. It might have been
Yeah.
something so terrible, so demeaning, so like just destructive. You do not ever have to forgive that, right?
Yeah.
And then you get
Absolutely.
to choose like, do I want to forgive this person? Do I want to let it go and give it back to them? Do I want to, and no, again, I have found that that work is really hard to do if you haven't first done the work within to be able to forgive yourself of all that judgment and narrative that you've had around
Yeah.
the situation. And even the whole part of like, because in trauma, we tie the person to the unforgivable act, right? And so it's being able to separate out every person is good, every person is bad. And we all have good and badness within us. And that is not the sum of who we are. All the
Yeah.
good that we've done does not ever outweigh all the bad. It's not a measuring scale like that. Like it's not transactional like that, right? It's
Yeah.
seeking for goodness, seeking for transformation, seeking for change.
Yeah.
So I think that's really
Absolutely.
powerful.
Yeah, and I love to use the word shadow, and I think it's that term is also used in trauma. Like we're all light and we're all shadow. And shadow
Mhm.
is a part that is in our unconscious that
Yes.
we don't know it's there, and yet it
Right.
runs our lives.
Right.
And the work is to just increase our light into that shadow, you
Hmm.
know. So I love
Yes.
that. So one of the questions I wanted you to address is what is not forgiveness? And I know we touched upon boundaries, and I think
Hmm.
that boundaries is a hot topic. It's
Right.
I hear like I'm on. Are you on Jennifer's like Facebook group? Are you
I
on? A,
I am. I only
I
get on every once in a while. It's a lot,
okay.
but
So yeah, it is a lot. I know it's a lot. And so boundaries always comes up. Like, how do I draw a boundary? What does it look like? What does it sound like? So can you give us your take on boundaries from your own experience?
yeah. Yeah. So to your point, it is not like oftentimes we want to say like, oh, somebody did X and X. I need to put a boundary up to make them stop. Right. And that is
Yeah.
not what a boundary is for at all. Right. Because that is very much, again, that external, we need to control the external
Mm,
environment. We need to control the other person. So I'm going,
yeah.
and then it's a lot of like, I'm requesting you to do X, Y, and Z. And then if you don't do it, then you're going to now have to do this and this and this. And that's not what a boundary is, right? A boundary is definitely being able to be like, I don't feel this is appropriate. I don't feel this is safe. this is what the boundary would be. And it can be like you just say it within your own mind, or you can tell the other person. But then, like, how the boundary is held is then if this is not upheld, I will then do X, Y, and Z. We don't give our power over to the other person when we place a boundary, right? And the
Yeah.
boundary comes with then, because I have, like some family members that, again, I do still see, but one of them is a perpetrator. And I have voiced, like, you know, you are not allowed to touch my body at all, right? Like, you don't come into this space. And if you start to try, or if you do, because there are times when he has come into this space and I go into a freeze mode, I can't walk away. I can't say anything. I can't. And sometimes I'll even go into that fawn response where I will pretend like it's okay.
Yeah.
And so then it's okay to know that that happened, know that my body did that response. And then when I am out of it, to then
Hmm.
be able to address it. That is where the boundary comes in, to be able to be like, hey, you did this and this and this. So now I am not going to be around you for this amount of time. I am going to, remind you every time I come in, hey, I don't want to hug. Hey, I don't want you getting too close to me. Hey, you need to stay away. I'm fine talking to you from across the room. Like
Yeah.
I will. So that is me being loving and taking care of myself. And like, does he like it? Does the other family members think I'm going over the top? Absolutely. Like they don't appreciate it. They think I'm ridiculous. And I just get to let them own that and be like, yeah, I know, because you all think that I should just let him touch my body however I want and should be okay with it. And that's
Yeah.
not okay. Right. And it just knowing like we have different understanding of what is okay, what is safe. And and I'm okay with that. So does that make sense? Does that help at all of
Yeah.
being like, I'm
No,
going to
it
hold on to my
totally
boundary
does.
and they aren't going to like it and it's okay.
Yeah. I love it. Because basically what you're saying is you're not giving your power away.
Mhm.
You're choosing your own actions, your own behaviors, from
Right.
a place of what is good for me,
Yeah.
what is safe for me, what is the most loving thing I can do for myself and for my
Right.
family, my
Right.
children.
Right.
And so then, what is the next step in your healing journey? What's the next step in your forgiveness journey now?
Yeah. I think for me, it is still in letting, um, because I will still have like these moments come up of these trauma narratives. And so, and they used to come up and they either would overtake me or they would come up and I would just judge them and be so mad that they were even there. Right. And so
Yeah.
now it's starting to be they come up and it's almost like they're a little bit nervous now to come
Oh,
up of like, can I share this with you? Is this okay? Like, are you going to get mad at me? Are you going to, because my nervous system is trying, I'm trying to retrain it and reframe it. Right. And so it's had experience along this journey where I've been really mad at it. It's had experience where I've totally enmeshed with it. It's had experience where I
mm,
have been so compassionate and loving and like I can totally understand. And so now it kind of feels like these things are coming up and they're just a little bit nervous. Like, we don't really know how you are, how you're going to respond. And there's parts of me that I want to be like, oh, come on. That was like a long time ago when I was really mean to you. That was like, I'm not that person anymore. But like, when it's these new narratives that like maybe I didn't understand that it was connected in this way. And so it's kind of like, I wouldn't say new narrative, it's an old narrative that I didn't understand was connected to this experience in my life. And it wants to come up because it's this old narrative that is associated with all these different versions of my healing.
yeah.
It's kind of like it's popping up like, is it okay to show up here? Is this appropriate? And how are you going to respond to us?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of my journey now, is to let it come up and to be able to be like, that's a good point. Do I need to go into that survival state? Does that
Yeah.
need to happen? And I kind of am now into this point of like checking in with her when she comes up and when this narrative comes up of wanting to be like, pretty sure we need to go into freeze right now. Pretty sure we need to go into fawn. Pretty sure we need to fight this or run away from this, right? And she's
Yeah.
popping up like, I am pretty sure this is it. And being able to let kind of her, I can able to take a breath and let her kind of look around and be like, you tell me, what do you think? As we look around in our environment right now and what's
Mm,
happening, does this need to come online? Do we need to really do this right now? And it's been
wow.
really cool because I can kind of have this conversation with her and being like, I know that you are telling me I need to go into this trauma response. I know exactly
Yeah.
what's going to happen in my body when I do that. I can pretty much play it out. Right. And I can start to even feel it a little bit in my body. And then I also am separated enough from it now to also be able to be like, and what does my inner wisdom want to offer? And can we have a conversation about like what is also true here? And is there a different way to act based on this? Right. And
I love
sometimes it
that.
is just like, yeah, I get it. You don't like this person. You don't think they like you. You don't want, like it's not even like I just don't like this person. Why are we even around them? Why are we even doing this? Why is this like a practice and a trial? Like, why do we have to do this work? Right. Like I still get that coming up all the time. But it's, yeah. So that's kind of my journey is being able to continue to communicate with her and let her come up and assess.
I
So
love that. Oh my gosh, that resonates with me so deeply. And it's like you're reforming your relationship with your own self, with all aspects of your own self. You
yes.
know, the internal critic, the inner child, the adult self, the wisdom that's within you, like all of it, it's like you're slow. And I was thinking about this today on my run. It's as if you're just all slowly bringing it all together into alignment, like
Right.
into the alignment the way that God wants us to be in alignment with all parts of us. So I love that. And so I love to end with this question. And I purposely did not ask you this question because I didn't want you to think about it.
I love it.
But what does it mean to you to lead with grace as it comes to trauma healing and forgiveness?
That's a good question. So to lead with grace um, around trauma healing and forgiveness, I think it really does just come back to tapping into continuing to ask myself, like, what does that mean from day to day? Like, what does that mean? Check
Mm,
in with my body. How does grace feel in my body? Like right now, when I say that, I feel this little bit of a warmth line that kind of starts right around my collarbone and kind of
mhm.
spreads and shoots straight down into like my belly. And then there's also like this spot in my chest that's like grace wasn't safe. There are times when it wasn't safe.
Mm.
And so I'm able to kind of like hold space for all of that and know, like, yeah, I know. I know it hasn't been. I know it wasn't. And like, I don't shove it down. I let that be there and know, like, that's for me is like, I'm curious about that then. Why in my heart right there did it tell me sometimes that's not safe? And being able
Yeah.
to like address that and go into that and feel that in my body. Because along with like that shooting down there, right? Like I then felt this warmth that kind of would spread throughout my back. And so it really is just like, and then I just feel this gratitude of like, I'm in my body. Like, back
Yeah.
in 2019, I didn't even know what that meant. And I can have you ask me a question and I'm going to get emotional because I just love my body now. And I'm so grateful. I just have a stronger testimony of why we are given bodies and how it connects to our wisdom and our spirit. And there's just so much power that comes in this union, in this connection. And I'm really grateful for it. And just being able to, again, tap it into forgiveness, being able to let go of the trauma responses that no longer serve me. I don't need those in my body. I do not need to store them anymore. And my body was never meant to store them. My body was never meant to hold them for as long as it has, right? Like I stored
Yeah.
that trauma for what, 40 years? It was
Wow.
never meant to. And to be able to feel so free and light,
Yeah.
to be able to be like, I am 46 now and I feel so much different in my body. I
Yeah.
know what it is to be in my body. And there's just this freedom that's beautiful. So,
I love how just you sharing your testimony and your spiritual beliefs, eh, that that you embody grace. And grace is the full spectrum of the light and shadow, and just holding space for that in your body. And to acknowledge that your body has this great capacity to do this. And it's just part of the healing process. So thank you so much.
you are welcome.
Thank you so much for being on here. And to all my listeners, I will make sure to have Cami's contact information in the show notes. If you have any other further questions about the work that she's doing, what she's passionate about, what her experience is, and how she can help you to move forward in your trauma healing, I highly, highly recommend you to reach out to her. I know you will not regret it. Not one bit. I have not regretted. So as her client, I do not regret it at all. And she also has a podcast. What's your podcast called again?
Go all in to let go. So it's the same
Yes.
as the name of my programs. So yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And so I will also have that link in the show notes as well. For sure, go and find her podcast, follow it, subscribe to it, and start listening to all the wisdom and experience that she is so ready to share with you and so willing to share with you. So, again, thank
Thank
you
you
so
so
much.
much, Hoey.
It was fun. I love it.
It was.
And everyone, have a wonderful day. Take care.